The morning sun cast long shadows across the war memorial on Centauri Prime. Commander Zethkar stood alone before the massive wall of black stone, his forearms hanging at his sides. His purple skin looked pale in the early light, and the scars across his face seemed deeper than usual. 20 years had passed since the war ended, but he still came here every year on this day. The memorial stretched higher than most buildings in the city. Thousands of names were carved into its surface, each one glowing softly with inner light. These were the soldiers who died during the Integration War, as historians called it now. Zethkar knew better names for it. The Human War. The Nightmare War. The war that changed everything. His 6 eyes traced familiar patterns across the stone. So many friends. So many good soldiers who never came home. The Velthari military had been proud once, confident in their place as the Coalition's finest warriors. That pride died with these names. Commander Zethkar? A young voice spoke behind him. He turned slowly. A cadet stood at attention, her uniform crisp and new. She was Velthari like him, but young. Too young to remember the war. Her skin still held the bright purple of youth, unmarked by battle scars or age lines. Cadet Meshara, he said, recognizing her from the academy. You should not be here. This is not a place for the young. Sir, I was walking to my morning classes when I saw you. I come this way every day, but I have never seen anyone at the memorial before dawn. She hesitated. May I ask why you come here? Zethkar looked back at the wall of names. How could he explain? This cadet had grown up in peace. She knew humans as trading partners, as allies, as friends even. To her generation, the Integration War was just history, no different from any other conflict in the past. These were my soldiers, he said finally. My friends, my brothers and sisters in arms. The Integration War, Meshara said with the confidence of textbook knowledge, when humanity joined the Galactic Coalition. It was a brief conflict lasting only a few months. Both sides reached a peaceful agreement once they understood each other better. Zethkar's laugh was bitter and harsh. It echoed off the memorial, stones like a wound refusing to heal. A few months? Peaceful agreement? He shook his head. Child, whoever taught you that history was either a fool or a liar. The cadet looked confused. Sir, my instructors said the war was shorter than most. Integration conflicts. The Coalition's superior technology quickly convinced humanity to surrender. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. Zethkar repeated the words like they tasted bad. There was nothing standard about the humans. Nothing at all. On the other side of the galaxy, morning was also breaking over the small farming world of Haven's Rest. Captain Jake Morrison, formerly of the Human Defense Corps, walked between rows of corn that stretched toward the horizon. His weathered hands checked each plant with the same care he once used to inspect weapons systems. The farm was simple, nothing fancy. A small house, a barn, fields that fed a few dozen families in the local community. It was the kind of life Jake had dreamed about during the long years of war, when home seemed like something that might not exist anymore. His dog, an old shepherd named Rex, walked beside him. The animal was getting slow, gray around the muzzle, but still alert. Rex had been with Jake since the war ended. Both of them were veterans now, settling into the quiet rhythms of peaceful life. Morning, Jake. Lisa Carter's voice called from the fence line between their properties. She was carrying a basket of vegetables from her own garden, tomatoes and peppers that grew well in Haven's Rest's gentle climate. Morning, Lisa. Jake smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles. Lisa was one of the few people who understood. She had been there during the war, serving as a combat medic with the Resistance Corps. They didn't talk about those days much, but they didn't need to. The understanding was always there between them. Thought you might want some of these for dinner, she said, setting the basket on his porch. The tomatoes came in especially good this year. Thanks. I've got some fresh corn if you want to trade. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher over the peaceful fields. In the distance, other farmers were beginning their daily work. Children played in front yards while their parents prepared for another ordinary day. It was everything they had fought to protect. Everything they had almost lost. Back on Centauri Prime, Cadet Meshara was growing more confused. "Sir, I don't understand. The historical records clearly state that human resistance collapsed quickly once they realized they were outmatched. The Coalition fleet was 10 times larger than anything humanity could field." 10 times larger, Zethkar nodded. "Yes, we thought that would matter. We thought numbers and technology were what won wars." He touched one of the names on the memorial wall. "Korvash believed that too. He was our fleet admiral, confident as any of us. He told us it would be over in 3 days." "What happened to Admiral Korvash, sir?" "The humans killed him, along with his entire command staff, along with 3,000 other good soldiers." Zethkar's voice grew quiet. "They used his own ship to do it." The cadet stared at him. This wasn't in any textbook she had read. "Sir, that's impossible. The records show that Admiral Korvash died in an accident during the peace negotiations." "An accident?" Zethkar laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "Yes, I suppose you could call it that. If you consider a human ramming a stolen Coalition destroyer into the Admiral's flagship at full speed an accident." Meshara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "But sir, that would be a suicide attack. Civilized species don't use suicide tactics." "Civilized species," Zethkar repeated. "That was our first mistake, child. We thought the humans were civilized like us. We thought they would follow the same rules we followed. We thought they would surrender when the situation became hopeless." He turned away from the memorial to face her directly. All 6 of his eyes focused on her young face. "The humans don't surrender. They don't follow rules. When you corner them, when you threaten what they care about, they become something else entirely, something we had never seen before." The wind picked up, rustling through the memorial gardens. Somewhere in the city, morning traffic was beginning to flow, normal life continuing as it had for 20 years of peace. "I want to tell you a story," Zethkar said, "about the day we learned what humans really are. About the day we discovered that some species would rather die than lose. About the day we found out that victory and defeat mean different things to different minds." He looked back at the wall of names one more time. "It's not a pleasant story, Cadet. It's not the kind of tale they teach in your history classes. But it's true, and someone needs to remember the truth." Meshara nodded slowly, sensing that something important was about to happen. "I'm listening, sir." "Good," Zethkar said, "because this is a story about the day the galaxy learned to fear." Zethkar closed his eyes and let the memories flow back. 30 years felt like yesterday when he remembered that first day. The day everything changed. "I was young then," he told Meshara. "Younger than you are now. A tactical officer aboard the battleship Eternal Victory. We were part of Admiral Korvash's Grand Fleet, the largest military force the Coalition had ever assembled for an integration." The cadet listened carefully, trying to imagine her scarred commander as a young soldier full of hope and confidence. The human system was called New Eden, a single star with 4 planets, only one of them holding life. Our intelligence report said they had maybe 200 ships total. Old designs, simple weapons, basic shields. We had over 3,000 vessels in our fleet. Zethkar opened his eyes and stared at the memorial wall. Admiral Korvash was so confident he brought reporters, war correspondents from every Coalition world, ready to record another glorious victory. The integration of humanity was supposed to be a celebration. 3 decades earlier, Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the Coalition fleet emerge from hyperspace. The sight took his breath away. Ships filled the view screens more than he had ever seen in one place. They came in waves, each one larger than anything in the human fleet. "Dear God," whispered Captain Sarah Knox, the Liberty's commanding officer. "How many are there?" "Sensors show 3,247 vessels," the tactical officer reported. His voice shook slightly. "Admiral Sullivan's entire fleet has only 212 ships." Jake felt his stomach drop. The math was simple and terrifying. Every human ship would have to destroy 15 coalition vessels just to break even. It was impossible. All ships, this is Admiral Kate Sullivan. The fleet commander's voice came over the communication system. I know what you're all thinking. I know how this looks. But remember what we're fighting for. Our homes, our families, our freedom. On the coalition flagship, Admiral Corvash reviewed the tactical display with satisfaction. The human fleet was forming defensive positions around their homeworld, exactly as predicted. They would make their stand, realize they were outmatched, and surrender within hours. Begin standard integration protocol, Corvash ordered. Target military installations and communication centers. Avoid civilian casualties. We want these humans to join our coalition, not hate us. Young Zethkar watched from his station as coalition forces moved into attack formation. Everything was going according to plan. The humans would see their disadvantage, their leaders would negotiate, and another species would peacefully join the galactic community. The first exchange of fire began at exactly 0800 hours. Coalition, standard time. Corvash's forces opened with precision strikes against military targets on the planet's surface. Orbital defense platforms exploded in controlled bursts. Communication arrays went dark. The human fleet responded with return fire, but their weapons barely scratched coalition shields. Human fleet is moving to engage, reported the tactical officer. They're spreading out, trying to use their smaller size for hit-and-run attacks. Corvash nodded approvingly. Classic inferior force tactics. Let them wear themselves out against our defenses. They'll surrender when they realize it's hopeless. But something was wrong. Instead of the careful, measured attacks of a military, trying to preserve its forces, the human ships were fighting with desperate fury. They threw themselves at coalition formations with no regard for their own safety. The USS Liberty, badly damaged from 3 direct hits, limped toward a coalition heavy cruiser. Captain Knox's voice echoed through the bridge. All hands abandon ship. Repeat, all hands abandon ship. Jake Morrison helped wounded crew members to the escape pods, but something made him look back at the tactical display. The Liberty was still moving, still accelerating toward the enemy ship. Captain, what are you doing? He called out. Sarah Knox sat alone at her command station, blood running down her face from a head wound. Someone has to show them what we're made of, Jake. Get to the pods, that's an order. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to stay, but other crew members were pulling him toward the escape pods. Through the small window, he watched the Liberty continue, its collision course with the Coalition cruiser. On the Coalition flagship, Zethkar stared at his tactical screen in confusion. Sir, the human vessel is not changing course. It's going to impact our cruiser. Move the cruiser out of the way, Corvash ordered, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. The human ship is matching our movements, sir. It's deliberately trying to ram us. Impossible. No civilized species uses suicide tactics. But the USS Liberty slammed into the Coalition cruiser at full speed. The impact should have destroyed both ships. But something else happened. The Liberty's reactor overloaded at the moment of collision, creating a massive explosion that tore through 3 Coalition vessels. The reporters on the flagship suddenly had a very different story to tell. By the ancestors, whispered Admiral Corvash. Did they just kill themselves to take out our ships? All across the battlefield, other human vessels were doing the same thing. Damaged ships accelerated toward Coalition formations. Fighters with failing life support manually guided their craft into enemy formations. Human ground troops, when surrounded, detonated their own positions rather than surrender. Zethkar watched his tactical display with growing horror. This wasn't warfare as the Coalition understood it. This was something else entirely. Something they had no training for, no defense against. Sir, called out the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander. Admiral Kate Sullivan's face appeared on the main screen. She was standing on the bridge of her flagship, smoke and sparks visible behind her. Blood stained her uniform, but her eyes burned with determination. Coalition forces, she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. You came here expecting us to surrender when we saw how outmatched we were. You thought we would calculate the odds and give up. She stepped closer to the camera. You don't understand humans at all. We don't surrender. We don't calculate acceptable losses. When you threaten our home, we fight until there's nothing left to fight with. Behind her, another explosion rocked the ship, but she didn't even flinch. Every ship you destroy will take 3 of yours with it. Every soldier you kill will cost you 10. Every city you attack will become a fortress. This is what we do. This is who we are. The transmission cut off as the human flagship engaged 2 coalition dreadnoughts simultaneously. On Centauri Prime, 30 years later, Zethkar finished his account of that first day. Cadet Mashara stared at him with wide eyes, her face pale. But, sir, that's madness. No species fights like that. It's not logical. Logic, Zethkar said sadly. We kept using that word. Logic, strategy, acceptable losses. The humans didn't care about any of it. They cared about winning, no matter what it cost. He touched the memorial wall again, feeling the names of friends who died that day and in the days that followed. We thought we were fighting a war, he said. We were wrong. The humans were fighting for survival. And there's a big difference between those two things. The sun climbed higher over the memorial, but Zethkar felt no warmth from it. Some memories were too cold to ever fade. That was just the first day, he told the cadet. It got much worse after that. Zethkar walked slowly along the memorial wall, his 4 hands tracing the carved names. Each one brought back memories he wished he could forget. The war was supposed to end in 3 days, he told Mashara. Instead, it lasted 15 years. 15 years of nightmares. The young cadet followed him, trying to understand. But sir, how could a primitive species fight the entire coalition for so long? Primitive. Zethkar stopped walking and looked at her. We kept using that word, too. We thought their technology was primitive. Their tactics were primitive. We were wrong about everything. He pointed to a section of the wall where hundreds of names were grouped together. These soldiers died in the Battle of Rigel Station. I was there. I saw what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. 2 years after the war began, Captain Jake Morrison found himself commanding a stolen coalition transport ship. The USS Liberty was gone, destroyed in that first terrible battle. But Jake had survived. Now he led a group of human soldiers deep into coalition space. They were not running away. They were not trying to find safety. They were hunting. Sir, we have 3 coalition supply convoys on our sensors, reported Sergeant Pete Davis, Jake's second in command. Lightly defended, carrying food and medical supplies to the front lines. Jake studied the tactical display. The convoys were heading to coalition forces attacking the human colony of New Shanghai. If those supplies got through, the coalition would have everything they needed for a long siege. Target all 3 convoys, Jake ordered. No survivors. Pete looked uncomfortable. Sir, our intelligence says those ships are carrying medical supplies, food for wounded soldiers. If we destroy them, the coalition didn't worry about our medical supplies when they bombed our hospitals, Jake said coldly. War is war, Pete. We do what we have to do. On the coalition medical ship Healing Light, Dr. Velnara was treating wounded soldiers from the New Shanghai assault. She was a healer, trained to save lives regardless of species. The idea that anyone would attack a medical vessel was unthinkable. The human raiders struck without warning. The Healing Light's shields, designed to protect against accidents rather than weapons, collapsed immediately. Jake Morrison's stolen transport rammed into the medical ship's engine section, causing a massive explosion. Dr. Velnara died along with 300 wounded soldiers and medical staff. The humans made no attempt to rescue survivors. Back on Centauri Prime, Zethkar continued his story. The humans changed the rules of war. Medical ships, supply convoys, civilian transports, nothing was safe from their attacks. They said we started it by attacking their world. They said everything was fair game now. Mishara felt sick. But that's against every law of civilized warfare. Medical ships are protected. You can't attack healers. Try telling that to the humans, Zethkar said bitterly. They had a saying during the war. If you don't want to die, don't point guns at Earth. It didn't matter if you were a soldier or a doctor or a supply clerk. If you helped the coalition war effort, you were a target. The war spread beyond military targets. Human raiders attacked mining stations that supplied coalition shipyards. They destroyed communication relays that carried civilian messages along with military orders. They poisoned water supplies on colonies that supported coalition troops. Lisa Carter, serving as a field medic with human resistance forces, learned to think like the enemy. When coalition forces overran her field hospital on the planet Keller, she didn't evacuate. Instead, she turned her medical knowledge into a weapon. The Velthari have a weakness in their respiratory system, she explained to her assistant as they prepared chemical compounds in the hospital basement. If we release this gas into their air supply, it will cause their lungs to shut down. Lisa, that's biological warfare. We're healers, not killers. Lisa looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. I've watched coalition soldiers burn human children alive. I've seen them use our own people as human shields. Being a healer doesn't mean being stupid. When coalition forces took the hospital, they found medical supplies that had been turned into chemical weapons, gas that specifically targeted alien biology, drugs that caused madness instead of healing, medical equipment rigged to explode when activated. 200 coalition soldiers died in that hospital, killed by the very supplies they thought would save their wounded. Zethkar rubbed his scarred face as he remembered those days. Dr. Carter was not the only one. Human medics across the galaxy began using their knowledge to create new weapons. They knew our biology better than we did. They knew exactly how to hurt us. The Coalition War Council met in emergency session as the casualties mounted. What had started as a simple integration was becoming a massacre, not just of humans, but of coalition forces who had never faced an enemy like this. They fight without honor, complained General Threshkar. They attack medical ships, they poison water supplies. They use children as suicide bombers. They use everything, corrected Admiral Korvash, his voice tired and old. The humans don't see rules in warfare, they see tools. Everything is a weapon to them. The breaking point came during the coalition attack on the human research station at Proxima Base. The station was lightly defended, holding mostly scientists and their families. It should have been an easy victory. Instead, it became another nightmare. Jake Morrison's raiders had been waiting. The research station was a trap, filled with experimental weapons and desperate humans who had nothing left to lose. When coalition forces landed, they found corridors filled with poisonous gas, rooms rigged with explosives, and human civilians who fought like wild animals. The worst part was the children. Human children who looked innocent and helpless, but who carried bombs in their toys and acid in their lunchboxes. Coalition soldiers trained to protect civilians hesitated to shoot children. The humans had no such hesitation about using them as weapons. 37 of my soldiers died in that station, Zethkar told Mishara, killed by human children who smiled at them before triggering explosives. The cadet was trembling now. That's impossible. Children can't be soldiers. No species would use their own young as weapons. The humans did. They said their children deserved a chance to fight for their future. They said it was better to die fighting than to live as slaves. Jake Morrison himself died in the Proxima Base operation, leading a final assault on the Coalition Command Center. But before he died, he made sure the station's nuclear reactor would overload. The explosion destroyed the research station, 3 coalition ships and every human and alien on the base. His last transmission was broadcast across the galaxy. This is what happens when you threaten human children. Remember us. The message played on every coalition frequency for weeks afterward. No one could stop it. The humans had hidden transmitters throughout coalition space, and Jake Morrison's final words followed coalition soldiers wherever they went. That's when we knew we couldn't win, Zethkar said quietly. Not because we weren't strong enough, but because the humans were willing to pay any price for victory. They would burn the galaxy down before they would surrender. He looked at the memorial, well, one more time, and the terrible thing is we started to believe they were right, that maybe living as their slaves would be better than dying as their enemies. The sun reached its peak overhead, but the shadows around the memorial seemed to grow longer. Darkness never faded, no matter how bright the light became. The war ended, Zethkar said, but not the way anyone expected. The wind grew stronger around the memorial, carrying the scent of distant rain. Zethkar felt the approaching storm in his bones, the same way he had learned to feel danger during the war years. How did it end? Meshara asked quietly. If the humans were so terrible, so willing to sacrifice everything, how did the war finally stop? Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. The war ended because we surrendered. The cadet stared at him in shock. But sir, that's impossible. The coalition had superior numbers, better technology, more resources. How could we surrender to humans? Numbers and technology don't matter when your enemy is willing to die for every inch of ground, Zethkar replied. The humans taught us that lesson over and over again. He began walking toward the center of the memorial, where a simple stone bench sat beneath a flowering tree. It was the only peaceful spot in the entire monument, and it held the most important names of all. 15 years into the war, the coalition controlled most of human space. Earth itself was under siege, surrounded by the largest fleet in galactic history. The human homeworld should have fallen within days. Instead, it became the site of the war's final nightmare. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the human battleship Defiance, the last major vessel in Earth's defense fleet. Around her, the planet's orbital defenses were falling one by one. Coalition ships filled the sky like angry stars, their weapons turning the night bright with destruction. Admiral, we're receiving surrender terms from the Coalition Command, her communications officer reported. Kate looked at the message on her screen. The terms were generous, considering how long the war had lasted. Humans would be relocated to colony worlds. Earth would become a coalition military base. The fighting would stop. She deleted the message without responding. All stations, this is Admiral Sullivan. She broadcast to every human ship and defense platform still fighting. The coalition thinks we're beaten. They think we'll surrender, now that they've got us surrounded. She paused, looking out at the enemy fleet that outnumbered her forces 1,000 to 1. They're wrong. We don't surrender. We never surrender. If they want our world, they can have it. But they'll pay for every inch with their blood. On the coalition flagship, Admiral Korvash watched the human homeworld with growing dread. 15 years of war had aged him terribly. His confidence was gone, replaced by the haunted look of a soldier who had seen too much death. Sir, the humans have rejected our surrender terms, his aide reported. Korvash closed his eyes. Of course they have. Begin the final assault. But the assault never came. As coalition forces moved into position around Earth, something unexpected happened. Human ships across the galaxy, ships that had been hiding in deep space for years, suddenly appeared throughout coalition territory. They struck at the same moment, hitting every major coalition world simultaneously. Not military targets this time, but civilian centers, cities where coalition families lived, worlds where children played in parks and parents worked in offices. The human message was clear. If Earth died, the coalition would burn. Lisa Carter, now commanding a human raider fleet, led the attack on the coalition capital world of Centauri Prime. Her ships struck the planetary defense network, while human ground forces, smuggled onto the planet years earlier, activated hidden weapons in the capital city. The coalition government building exploded in a pillar of fire that could be seen from orbit. The Planetary Defense Command Center followed seconds later. Within hours, the most important world in coalition space was defenseless. This is Captain Carter of the Human Resistance, Lisa broadcast from her flagship. Your leaders started this war by attacking our home. Now you know how it feels. Her ships didn't attack the civilian population. They didn't need to. The message was clear enough. If the coalition wanted to destroy Earth, humans would destroy everything the coalition cared about. Similar attacks happened across coalition space. Human raiders struck at hundreds of worlds simultaneously, proving that nowhere was safe from their reach. After 15 years of war, humans had learned every weakness in coalition defenses. The Coalition War Council met in emergency session in an underground bunker. The civilized leaders of a dozen species sat around a table, trying to understand how they had lost control of a war they should have won. "We have to negotiate," said Counselor Meshara, the current cadet's grandmother. "The humans have proven they can strike anywhere, anytime. We can't protect our entire civilization from an enemy like this." "But the humans don't negotiate," Admiral Korvash said bitterly. "They don't want territory or resources. They want victory or death. Nothing else matters to them." "Then we give them victory," Counselor Meshara replied. "We end this war before they destroy us all." The peace negotiations took place on a neutral station in deep space. The coalition representatives came in massive ships, surrounded by security fleets. The human delegation arrived in a single transport vessel. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked into the conference room alone, carrying no weapons and no guards. She sat across from the coalition leaders and waited for them to speak. "We're prepared to offer you equal membership in the coalition," Counselor Meshara began. "Full rights, shared technology, representation in government. All we ask is that the killing stops." Kate was quiet for a long moment. "Equal membership?" "Yes. Full partners in the galactic community. Not subjects. Not clients. Partners." "Partners," the counselor confirmed. Kate smiled for the first time in 15 years. "Then we accept." The war ended that day. Not with conquest or surrender, but with exhausted enemies choosing to become allies. The coalition had learned that some species couldn't be conquered, only befriended. On Centauri Prime, 30 years later, Zethkar finished his story. The storm clouds were gathering overhead, but the rain hadn't started yet. "The humans got everything they wanted," he told Meshara. "Equal status, protection for their worlds, the right to live free. They won the war by proving they would rather die than lose." The cadet was quiet for a long time, trying to process everything she had heard. "But sir, the humans I know aren't like that. They're peaceful. They're farmers and traders and teachers." "The same humans," Zethkar corrected. "Kate Sullivan runs a school now, teaching coalition children about Earth's history. Lisa Carter operates a medical clinic, healing the same species she once fought. They chose to become peaceful after they won the right to be free." He stood up from the bench and looked at the memorial one last time. "That's the thing about humans, child. They can be the most gentle species in the galaxy, or the most terrible. It depends on how you treat them." The first drops of rain began to fall, gentle at first but growing stronger. Zethkar didn't seek shelter. He let the water wash over his scarred face. "Why do you come here every year?" Meshara asked. "Why remember something so terrible?" "Because someone needs to remember." "The price of that peace," Zethkar replied. "Someone needs to remember that the humans chose to be our friends when they could have been our conquerors." He began walking away from the memorial, leaving the young cadet alone with her thoughts. But before he got too far, he turned back one last time. "Remember this story, Cadet Meshara. Remember it well, and pray that we never give humans a reason to remember theirs." The rain fell harder now, washing over the memorial stones. The names of the dead gleamed in the water, a reminder that peace was not free, and that some victories were won not through strength, but through the wisdom to know when to stop fighting. In the distance, thunder rolled across the sky like the echo of ancient battles. But on Centauri Prime, as on 100 other worlds, children played safely in their homes, protected by a peace that had been bought with blood and sealed with mercy. The humans had kept their word. They had chosen to be friends instead of conquerors, and the galaxy was better for it.